Uh, Hi, Henry. Um,
Hello.
hi. Yeah, I think you are also like one of the like special guests to my with engineer stories. You are the second non-Vietnamese.
Mhm.
I started this with engineer story like 3 months ago with the intention to interview Vietnamese engineers. Um, and now I'm like experimenting to invite non-Vietnamese engineers. I mean, like about it. Like to me, so I like experimenting. So you very a special friend, ex-colleague. You are tech leader. You are. I say like you're very special guest. So please, can you introduce about yourself? Like
Yeah,
maybe, yeah, just yeah. I guess
sure.
yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me here. So yes, I'm not the Vietnamese engineers, but yeah, I feel very happy to be here and share anything that
Yeah.
I know.
Sure.
So yeah, my name is Henry, Henry Suryawirawan, full name. I come from Indonesia, but have been staying here in Singapore, and yeah, we worked together a few years back. So I'm the VP of engineering for Indonesian startup called Flip,
Mm,
and also host a podcast called Tech Lead Journal.
mm.
So yeah, that's all about me, I guess.
Sure. Um, Maybe could you say a bit more about the Tech Journal, because this project I've been following you like for very long, at least 2 years, and you have done an amazing job. Like you keep like you show you order show like every week, very consistently in the last 2 years. It really a lot of work, to be honest. So maybe it's about what drives you to do this. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, the podcast actually has been around for 3 years. So
Mm. Oh.
149 episodes. Yeah, almost 150.
Mm.
So it's been quite a long journey. I mean, if we look back since I started, right?
Yes.
I mean, what motivates me to start it? I think it's all like you said, right? It's an experiment.
Yeah.
So I like listening to podcasts after, you know, having found so many great podcasts, and it's all free, right? A lot of
Mm.
contents, a
Yeah.
lot of thought leaders, and
Yeah.
you can just pick and choose. You can think of it just like Netflix, right? But it's for free, except that you have to choose multiple channels.
Mm.
So, and I like coming from engineering tech background, I also would love to see engineering tech kind of podcasts, right?
Mm.
And most of them come from America, US, or some parts of Europe, mostly predominantly still from US.
Sure.
And I look around, not many, actually almost none, I would say, podcasts from at least Southeast Asia that
Mm.
qualifies my so-called my content, lah, like my type of content.
Mm.
So I feel like, okay, maybe I should start and do this, right?
Mm.
Although it's a experiment. Yeah, so started with my ex-colleagues, right?
Mm.
My circles here in Singapore. Sooner and later, I get bigger guests, I get thought leaders, and
Mm.
then yeah, continue doing that until now. I guess now I think it's quite a lot of episodes, so it's like
Yeah.
part of my life in a sense.
Yes. Um, Been for those who but may not know about you, maybe I know you like almost like more than 10 years, 11 years since when we were still working together in Great Eastern. Uh, but it's a very long time, and also like on and off, I follow you on LinkedIn. You have transitioned yourself from an IC role into a tech leader. So maybe could you please give your advice about like software engineer, someone maybe like in a job about 2 to 5 years, and he want to transition from a good engineer to a great engineer, and maybe to a tech leader, maybe from good to great first. That the first part. Yes.
Yeah, so I think it doesn't just apply to engineers, but like any
Mm.
kind of, like employees, people, or entrepreneurs, right? I
Mm.
think to me, the one who qualifies to be great, right, are
Mm.
people who has a lot of ownership mentality
Mm.
and a high agency. High agency here means like, yeah, you want to do good and you take charge and you complete it, right? You execute it,
Yep.
and you complete it, right? So to me, those really qualifies, good versus great. And they always deliver. I mean, like not always, but they often deliver, right? So deliver results. So these are, I would say, like two critical things that I always try to look for. Honestly, I thought it was easy to find, these kind of traits in most people, but throughout my journey, I find it actually really hard. And I mean, not to say bad things about people, but it's just that people has different motivation, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes when you are not motivated, maybe due to the work, due to the culture, due to the environment, right? You may not be able to exercise these two attributes, right? And that is completely fine.
Yeah.
So my message here is that even though you think your current place, your current situation doesn't allow you to do so, maybe find another place, another context where you can exercise this more. And that actually would put you much, much better, right, in terms of, being great, like what you said.
Yeah.
And I think, being problem solver is also another thing, another key parts of being a good leader, right?
Yeah.
If you want to become a leader, you need to solve problems, right? You cannot just do, your mundane tasks or the things that are already well defined.
Yeah.
So look for problems, use your knowledge and experience, and solve it. I think that's kind of like the traits of being a good leader. And when you grow in seniority, right, great leaders will increase the scope of impact and the scope of results, right? I think
Yes.
that's how I see it. And don't forget, right? I mean, especially for engineers, we like to code, we like to talk to the machines. I think the most important thing is the soft skills. I think this also an attribute that I find great leaders would have, right? Communication skills, presentation, writing skills, right? And also just the human aspects of being a leader, right? Like empathy, psychological safety, and things like that.
Yeah.
So
Sure.
all in all, those are the attributes that I think would make you a much better person and also employee or engineer. Yeah.
Yeah. Understand. Back a bit to your earlier like history of work. You used to work for Google. I think that to anybody like before that you work for ThoughtWorks. Those are like, to me, like even like top notch in tech. So basically, I feel like you started to become popular since you contributed into the open source project. I forgot the name.
Apache Beam, maybe. Are you
Yeah,
referring
Beam,
to
yeah,
it?
Beam, Apache Beam.
Yeah.
Are you still contributing to that
No,
project?
I'm not anymore.
Oh,
I have my own open source project called TechLead Journal, I guess.
I see, I see. Uh, yeah, maybe could you give some advice about those? To me, I think engineers always try to look for interesting problem to solve, but sometimes maybe due to the work, like you say, like, they find a job, it's safe, pay decently, but they don't find enough interesting problem to solve in the company. So what do you think about the contributing to open source project? Like GPM, we have an engineer to like hone the skill with problem solving and also like building his own portfolio for the next job. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it's always good to have something else outside of work, right? I mean, traditionally in the past, I used to think like as long as you did great at work, right, you can continue your trajectory. That was my belief in the beginning, right? But over the time, actually, it changed a lot. Like for example, I was part of the retrenchment. I was part of a company that has a pretty bad culture, I would say. I wasn't really happy there. I was part of also in a situation where work just becomes quite boring. Like you don't really feel energized by doing the work, right? So, which means that actually, apart from the work itself, I think you should also have another avenue or channel to, maybe improve yourself, feel more passion, energy, and things like that.
Yeah.
Open source could be one thing if you really like coding and if you really like the project, right? I think finding the right project is very important. Not just project in terms of, like high, like how should I say, like an advanced kind of technology or many people contributing, but a project where you can learn, right? If you just started.
Yeah.
Like there are few committers that maybe can guide you, give you guidance. They write good code, right? It's not like any open source project has good code. So be very aware about that. Yeah. Where you can also learn and exercise, and in the end, right, if your change got merged into the main branch, so to speak, right, I
Yep.
think will make you quite proud.
Yeah.
But open source is not just one thing, right? You can also do it many various ways, right? It could be it could be building content, creating content. It could be, teaching someone, right? It could be just, doing your pet project at home, which you never publish anyway, right? I think that also qualifies, right? So
Yes.
I think, yeah, these days there are so many options. There are so many, opportunities. It's just for you to maybe take the steps and try it. Like I'm sure you probably won't end up doing the same thing all the time. Maybe you do this once, or you find another opportunity, then from there you can continue.
Yeah.
Mhm.
There's some thought leader saying about the motivation and discipline. So motivation, like it's like you get excited about something, you do it, you spend some time, like a few days or a few weeks do it, and then you stop and you start again. But for you, what are for you is discipline, especially with the podcast, right? You mentioned you've been doing for 3 years. Uh, what are your thought about how you make yourself feel disciplined? Like how you discipline yourself? That
Yeah,
is the gist of the question.
yeah.
Yeah.
There are a few things that maybe I'm sure many of you would have heard this, but you should start with why. I mean, this Simon Sinek's book,
Yeah.
right? Simon Sinek's quote, start with why.
Yeah.
I think that's very important, because why your motivation, right, can go up and down. That's correct. But the reason is because maybe your why is not big enough, right? You don't see a point where you should do this consistently.
Yeah.
Like for me, even before I started, right, I had a lot of thoughts, like as if like I will continue this forever, right? What benefits would it bring? If I got a lot of work at at my workplace, would I still be continue? Would I still be able to continue?
Yeah.
Is there anything that I would use this as a part of my life, right? Those kind of stuffs. And I think, yeah, the why is quite like well defined for me. Like at least I know why I want to do this podcast.
Sure.
And I mean, the results also kind of like help me, right? Because I can see a lot of traction, people listening and giving good feedback.
Yeah.
So that kind of like a cycle, right? The other thing I think is this is part of my maybe personal brand strategy, right? And also a way to actually upskill myself, because I always love reading in the past, right? Reading books and consuming, knowledge and things like that. But what I find is that those knowledge are great, but you never channel it, right? You never share it, you never channel it, and it actually goes nowhere as well.
Correct.
So I have this concept, right? I call it the 3 C's, right? So the first one is actually consume, right? You like consuming knowledge, books, podcasts, whatever that is. You at the same time you also need to create, right? Not just consuming, but you create. Create here means like writing blogs, producing podcasts, creating YouTube video, for example, or creating open source project. And the last one is actually, I forget what's the last one. I think it's community or something like that. Like you share it, right? So you don't just keep it to yourself, but you share it. The reason why it's important is because you need to have a lot of networks to succeed in the world, right?
Sure.
Very, very rare, I would say, if not impossible, right? Like you can succeed all by your own, right? You need people to help you, to support you, buy your products, or whatever, right? So you really need to have a good network, and sharing is just one part for you to build your community, your networks, right? And people who actually knows you and will probably refer you to someone else. So yeah, these two are like the key motivations for me, and why I'm still doing this until now as well. And I just love being able to talk to great leaders out there and learn firsthand from them, right?
Maybe what are your advice for someone like me? I mean, for me, I mean, for those who maybe not or know about me, I am kind of like out of job recently, and for now I'm like in a flexion point to transition into an engineering leader. So what your advice for someone like me? And how to move from IC to engineering leader?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would say that my first advice, anyone, this is common question, by the way, so many
Yeah.
people ask, right?
Yes.
So my first question would be, are you comfortable working with people? I think that's the first criteria, because being a leader is not just cool in terms of title and maybe like more benefits. Maybe it looks like you are the man calling the shot, right? But it's actually not the biggest part of the job. The biggest part of the job is actually managing people, like working with people, maybe not just people below you, like your direct reports, right? But also with the peers, and maybe even managing up, right, with the your supervisors, bosses, and all that. So like being able to be comfortable working with people, right? Like your soft skills, empathy, right? And don't forget, right? It's not like all the time people are working happily, right? Many times people are not happy, disengage, or
Yes.
they come up with personal problems, right? Or they come up with work challenges.
Yeah.
So leaders will need to be able to help those people to thrive, right? Because at the end of the day, right, for a leader to succeed, actually it should be the people who help the leaders to succeed, right? The direct reports, the people should succeed first, and then the true leader will come out and say that, yeah, as part of my leadership, right, these people actually become successful, and hence I can also become successful. Yeah. So that's the way I see it. I think working with people is one thing. The other thing is, I think, working with ambiguity, right? I mean, as you grow more senior, for example, right? There are so many ambiguous things. You are expected to make a lot of decisions. Maybe in the first place, you are expected to find what problems to solve, because there are so many problems. You cannot solve everything. And it's highly ambiguous sometimes, right? So leaders will need to be able to find the problems and then execute it. Sometimes it's tricky because, yeah, you will sometimes rely on good data, sometimes are not. So this is a part where you need to exercise your experience, past experience, knowledge, and maybe network, right? Yeah, like coach, mentor, or people who can give you guidance. And I think this is very, very important, right? For you to become a great leader that is trustworthy, right? Because otherwise, I think it's really hard to. I'm sure some of us would have seen some kind of leaders like this, right? Where they're just, maybe just doing okay but not great, right? So I think, yeah, working with ambiguity is something that is. I still also myself get challenged over time, right? But I think this is another thing. The other one, I think, related to working with people as well, and maybe working with others, right? Is, I think, the more I become a leader and hire managers, right? It's very important to be able to have difficult conversations, right? It could be dealing with non-performers. It could be dealing with hard to work with stakeholders, for example. It could be dealing with whoever that is, right? And I think being able first to be comfortable in having those difficult conversations, I think that's really critical to be a successful leader. Because if you just keep delaying, keep deferring, and in the end you're not talking about it, right? I think as a leader we expect actually to solve like systemic problems, right? So if a leader cannot exercise that, I think, yeah, that's also kind of like difficult for people to succeed, right? And yeah, just making a lot of decisions, good or bad, as long as it's not really, really bad. I think, yeah, I think that's very important.
Sure. Talking about ambiguity, we have any your own like framework to decide do the right thing at the right time?
Yeah, I don't know whether it's qualified as framework or something like that, right? I think it's there's actually a lot of science behind making good decisions. One author that I read her book before, right? Her name is called Annie Duke. I think there's one good book called How to Decide. Annie Duke herself is like a poker player, so she kind of like very good decision making, I guess. And she kind of like explained in her book, right, how should you make a good decision. But
Sure.
for me, when I make decision, I think the first thing very important to understand is that whether your decision is type 1 or type 2, right? This is referring to Jeff Bezos' decision making framework, I guess, right? So type 1 is a decision where it is very consequential and it is really hard to reverse. Sometimes it's irreversible, right?
Correct.
So for this type of decision, you really need to take time because it's very straightforward. It's consequential and sometimes irreversible, right? This could be, for example, I don't know, you wanna buy a house, put a lot of mortgage, for example. This is really, really hard if you want to back out, right? Maybe it's not impossible, but it's really hard. Or if you want to marry somebody, right? Oh, yeah, although also can be done, right? But again, it takes a lot of effort and money as well, right? So knowing type 1 versus type 2 decision is very, very important.
Correct.
Then after you know type 1 versus type 2, for type 2, right? Some people, including me, we love to overanalyze. Like you have so many options, right? I don't know, like for example, this computer versus that computer. For example, Netflix, this movie versus that movie, this podcast versus that podcast. So I learned it from any Duke, right? So for these kind of things, right, actually it doesn't really matter. And one way to gauge it, like for example, whether this is a decision that really is inconsequential, is that let's imagine you take that decision. How long will it take you to actually forget what you decide and the results that you took? For example, her example is actually going to a restaurant and picking menus, right? Sometimes we see a lot of menus, we want everything, but we cannot eat everything, right? So we kind of like overanalyze, which food and all that. But if you imagine, let's say you take a menu which you don't like, most probably maybe that day, end of the day, you will say, yeah, I eat crappy food, but then you forget it the next day. So this is actually a very inconsequential decision, which we shouldn't even take a lot of time to decide, right? Because the time horizon is really, really short. And tomorrow there will be a new decisions to do.
Sure.
And also her good advice on type 2 decision is that make a lot of decisions for this kind of thing, right? Make a lot of decisions and learn from it, like why you decided that way. Is there a better way to decide in the future and things like that? And this is probably one of my guide on making decisions. The other thing is, I think for some decisions which are critical, which probably will have a lot of impact, not just yourself and to others, right? You need to be in a good state of mind. This is very important, like not to be emotional. That's the first thing. Not to feel tired. Try to, like, there's a good advice is like when you want to make this kind of decision, sleep on it first. Like don't make the decision on the day itself, but sleep on it, right? Like get a night's rest, and then see if tomorrow you will still think the same thing, right?
Sure.
Because you will ruminate about it. You will maybe think in your shower, in your dinner, and then when you go to bed, and tomorrow probably you come up with a much better clarity, hopefully. But I think another thing that I just want to say, when you mentioned like the right decision at the right time, right? I think it's really, really hard to really have all the stars align for you to make the right decision at the right time, right? It's like jackpot. So I think it's to me, right? It's not a matter of really finding all the stars to be aligned, but actually just make the decision what you think is right. And you may fail, and that is actually perfectly fine, as long as, again, not consequential. And move on and iterate and learn from it.
Very, very helpful. Very, very helpful. Very, very long and very thoroughly answer. Since you've been doing Technical Journal for 3 years, right? I mean, what are your favorite authors, leaders for the podcast? Maybe it could be from the we just now talking about the data driven. I mean, maybe you have some data about the number of most watched, most listened, most review.
So actually, I do have a page on the website, the technicaljournal.dev website, a menu called Top Episodes, right? You can find it there, and I always update it every week. So I mean, few popular episodes. I think the number one currently is Neil Ford from ThoughtWorks, and he's talking about software architecture. The second one, I think, is Von Vernon, and he's talking about domain-driven design. And the third one is from Kevlin Henney. Yeah, it's about software engineering in general, like being a good software engineer. Yeah, but to pick my favorites, actually, I do love most of them, right? If not all of them, right? Because I would say I learn something new every time I interview somebody, right? Some are like great, like a lot of learnings, even though some are like not that many, but still I find it really, really useful.
Sure. Thank you. Lately, I came across a couple of, I would say, like enterprises, like banks or MNC, right? Or even startup, because in nowadays the blind bit blur between the job roles. So I mean, last time we have concept like software engineers, then we have software architect, enterprise architect, data architect, very functional vertical discipline. Now they see that the trend of the industry moving toward like hiring for SA, like social architect, someone where know a bit of tech, and know architecture, know a bit of sales, like can communicate with the stakeholders. What are your thoughts about how someone can transition from software engineer? The starting point, you can see like most of them are they're software engineer. What were your thoughts about it? Like someone can transition from software engineer to SA, or could be like for the employee perspective, how they can find this kind of candidate suitable for the role in SA.
But the first thing I think very important, it comes back to your individual first, in my view, right? Don't box yourself. Don't put a constraint in yourself. I'm a software engineer and that's it. Like, or even worse, I'm a mobile engineer and that's it, right? Or even worse is like I'm a React Native mobile engineer and that's it. Like I don't know anything else, right? So first is like don't try to box yourself, right? Maybe we are good at some skills, some technologies, but know that technologies change all the time. What may be good to you, right? Maybe in 10 years, who knows, like what's going to be, right? So don't box yourself. Always try to find areas where you can expand. Like the adjacent area. When you mentioned, for example, you are, for example, a backend engineer, right? Maybe you could try, doing data engineering. Maybe you could try, mobile engineering. Maybe you could try DevOps, right? Whatever that interests you, I think no harm in knowing a little bit of those, right? Because I always love to say, like, how do you know if you're a good engineer? So just imagine if you have to build a startup, your own startup, and you have to build everything on your own. Would you be able to do it or not? That to me qualifies a good engineer. Some call it maybe full stack engineer, but this is beyond that, right? Like you could actually understand end to end what things are involved, and you can actually do it. Maybe not perfect, yes, that's fine, but you actually understand everything, right? So if you can become this kind of like an end-to-end engineers, right? I think that really, really is powerful, and you can work in so many areas, not just solutions architect, right? Because solutions architect needs to build solutions, right? And sometimes, yes, you can use the product itself, or you can use the technology that is available, but sometimes it's actually a mix of many things. Sometimes are new technologies, and being able to expose yourself into so many different things will help you to come up with a better solutions, right? And I think I learned this also from Neil Ford, right? I mentioned the top episode currently, right? He's saying is like architecture at the end of the day is about options, right? There's no right or wrong architecture. There's no right or wrong software, I would say, right? It's all about options. It's about context, right? And to be a good solution architect, right, you need soft skills, definitely, right? It's not just engineering. But another thing that is important is that you really need to know a lot of options, because if architecture is about options, you really need to know the options that are available and make a good decision, like which option you should apply to your situation.
Sure. I think the other day we met for lunch. I asked you just one word, how you describe yourself. I mean, you are like, I also talk to some people who know you, and they say like you are very capable. I think you can do almost like anything you want to do. But for yourself, like how you answer the question, like how do you see yourself in next 5 years?
Yeah, this is like a very trivia question, interview question that normally get asked, right? Like I would say these days, this modern era, I would say at least, it's really hard to say what do you want to do in 5 years. I mean, as you can see in the past few years, right? Things change rapidly.
Yeah.
Not just about pandemic, but also technologies, right? You can see AI now is becoming more, right? There may be other technologies, and soon we will probably don't know what kind of things we will do.
Yeah.
The other thing that happens as well, right? As we have, so we are going through all these changes and disruptions, right?
Yeah.
I think you yourself will change a lot. Maybe it's not about doing this same job anymore. You want to do something else, right?
Yeah.
Or if you think, oh, I just hate doing this anymore, I just want to switch my career.
Yeah.
We can't really predict. 5 years, I think, is probably too long. But I still advise people to actually think through from time to time. It could be yearly thing. It could be like twice a year, for example. Think through exactly what do you want to become, right? What actually motivates you? Because as a human, at the end of the day, to be really happy, right, you need to serve some purpose, I would say, right? Yeah, to have the motivation, right? And actually knowing what you want, knowing how you can actually go and achieve that is very, very important. Yeah.
Sure. I'm looking at the next question. Okay, since you are on the other side of the table, I mean, you used to apply for a job, so now I believe you are leading engineering team at Flip. So you like also need to hire people from time to time. But when someone apply for the job, you scan different things. You scan for the CV, scan for LinkedIn, you scan for ask for the side project, or you can ask for which school he graduated from. But all these factors maybe play it. But what do you do to know that you pick the right people when you hire for your engineering team?
Yeah, I learned about hiring a lot from my time at Google, and I used to interview people when I was working there as well.
Sure.
I think the key thing I learned from Google, right, the way they hire is that the first thing is before you even hire, like you interview somebody, right, you need to think through what the job, like that, what is the expectation that you would like that person to do, what kind of qualifications, right, the minimum qualifications, the preferred qualifications, and things like that. And then you need to build what they call rubrics. Maybe you can call it also scorecards or attributes or whatever that is. You need to build rubrics that you think would be really, really important for this type of role. For example, right, rubrics here actually involves not just your core skills, right? For example, if you hire software engineer, it's not just about coding skills, right? But it's also about the other aspects. It could be like your analytical thinking, problem solving, right? Critical questions that you ask during the interview and things like that. And you can also assess like leadership. I think it's very, very important, right, in an interview to be able to gauge whether this person is just like doing job as what is ordered, or is someone who can have an high agency and be able to do stuff on his own, right? So I think that's really important. And of course, you have company values. Right, at the last one, the last rubric, probably you could assess whether this person fits the company values that you have or not, right? And there's no right or wrong here. It's really hard to gauge during maybe 1 hour interview, right? But at least some kind of signals you can tell, especially the bad ones. If you have the bad signals, then you can really tell this definitely doesn't suit our values. And after you set these rubrics, right, it's not done, right? You need to actually come up with a set of questions, and these, I think, should be standardized. Means that you will need to prepare all the possible questions that you would ask for this person, right? And write it down, including not just the question, but also the possible answers and the different levels of answers. Like, for example, if you want to differentiate between an engineer that is like maybe junior, right, versus the one who actually knows more advanced, right? What would qualify, right, for their answer to be judged that way, right? So, and then having this shared with all the panel interviewers, right? Like you should not ask questions that that interview create during the session, right? So they all should be standardized, and they should all write feedback, right? like write feedback exactly based on the questions, based on the rubric that you said. Write the feedback, right? And then capture it. So yeah, this to me is something that I also exercise at my current work now. And it has helped me a lot in coming up with more objective thinking on how to hire the right people. Eventually, sometimes you may hire, maybe not so right people. I think that's fine. It's really, again, it's really, really hard to find the right people within just maybe a few hours interview, right? And it's just limited data. So, but yeah, I think if you follow this framework, right, at least it's not random. Like it's based on some decisions that you have already thought through.
Let's switch gear a little bit. I know that you're a very busy man. You have a engineering leader job at Flip. You have a family with 3 children. You have your podcast. How do you spend yourself as well as your family? How you prioritize different thing and do it so nicely?
I mean, it looks probably nice to you, but actually internally it's a struggle, right? Of course, I mean, time is the same, like equalizer for everyone. We only have 24 hours, right? And it's just a matter how you use it.
Correct.
Like for yourself, right? How do you prioritize stuff?
Like
to me, of course, sometimes it's a big juggle, right? Sometimes work can be really busy, and you have, for example, issues, incidents. At night you have to work on the podcast and things like that. So I think the first thing is, I would say it's really, really hard to have like a work-life balance or even a balance, right? What you should strive for is something what people say is like a cycle or season, right? You could have like a work season, and then you can have like a rest season and things like that. And and it's very important to still go through the season, right? Not just like work all the time, but going through that season. So for me, sometimes I don't think I find the right time management or productivity hack that works, right? For me, just first of all, knowing what is important, and then just do what is the important thing first, right? And the rest should follow, right? If you find something more important, you just do that one first.
You do work out, right? I mean, you play football every week. For me, I'm playing tennis. I think it did improve mental health also. Like we need to have a, like as you mentioned earlier on, we need to have a good state of mind, staying healthy, fit, so that we can keep everything in balance. The job, family, your own self. All right.
This is also one thing I learned, right? I just shared this with a friend last time, right? I forgot who talked about this. I think maybe it's James Clear or somebody else, right? But there's a really a high connection between brain and your body, right? So imagine, let's say you are really in a bad mental health or you're stressed, right? The way to hack your brain so that it doesn't stay in that mood is actually to use your body, right? And when you say exercise, right, it's just one thing, right? Exercise, sometimes cold shower. People do this kind of things these days, right? So it's actually a hack to actually use your body to affect your brain. And it could also do the reverse, right? Let's say if you have like I don't know, like lethargic body, or you feel tired and all that, you should also hack your brain such that you have more energy, right? More, I don't know, like more motivation, and then you can change your body.
Very helpful. I think lately I met some, like a doctor. He had a day job to practice in a hospital. He also have his building his own startup. He had a family with 2 kids, and his body a little bit overweight. I asked him whether he has time to exercise. He said no, because he's so bogged down with work. He said the only time he see the children in the morning when they bring the 2 children to school, and when they come home from office like 9, 10 p.m., 11 p.m. every day, his children already went to bed. The only time you can see the children in the morning when they bring the children to school. I sometimes just always to say like, hey, doctor, you are a doctor, you need to first take care of yourself first. Right? Maybe you just spend like 5 minutes, do push up, do running at the desk where you are. Yeah, sometimes it's hard.
And I think this is the challenge of being a human, right? So what is logical is sometimes not something we do, not maybe not practical, or
Correct.
even like you said, right? Even a doctor, right? Not all really, maintain their health, their exercise, their diet, and all that.
Yeah.
I think it's really a part of a human challenge, I would say. Like it's just the way the brain works, right? And if you understand, right, human loves to do things at minimum, right? The less energy as possible, and this is just a part of evolution from a long time ago. Because why? People learn that if you conserve energy during that time, right, where you have so many danger, wild animals and all that, right, you can actually use the energy later on, right, when there's a danger situation comes. And this has gone, multiple years, right? And that's just part of the brain works, right? And this continues with our modern era where we have no danger, but we still want to operate that way. We want to use the lesser energy as much as possible, conserve the energy somehow, and choose for the shortcut, right? I think being aware of this first is really, really important, right? Like knowing that you actually will always fall into this kind of a mindset. And at the other end is that then now you should think, right? How should I use my energy in the right proportion, right? Like if health is of the utmost important for you, then you should conserve some energy to do that kind of exercise.
I you still have some few minutes more?
Yeah, I do.
Let me go switch gear back to a bit to engineering. I think the core activity of a software engineer is still writing a code. Let's talk a bit about the generative AI, ChatGPT, Copilot, and so on. It really like revolutionized the way how an engineer works. What you have seen, or maybe from the team you work with, how did we impact or influence the way of how engineer create the value for the company? How he can work with this all kind of AI, Gen AI to help him be more productive, create more value.
Yeah, actually, I want to go back to what you said in the beginning first, right? Like when you say software engineer, the work still is to produce code, right? To write the code. I think that is not all true. I mean, the best description of the role of software engineer is to write a software that solves the like business problem or some kind of problem, right? And I think as of now, AI hasn't reached that stage yet where it even knows like what problem you want to solve and build the whole system, end to end, right? It's not just a snippet of code, but like build architecture, design, all these services, right? And come up, boom, you have everything. So I think we have not reached that stage yet, which means, right, as a good software engineer that understands how to solve a problem, how to solve the right problem some more, right? Like like sometimes we are just given a spec and we just code it, right? But eventually sometimes it's not the right solution to build, right? So an engineer who knows how to solve the right problem, will be able now to have a new option, which is to use AI to help your job, right? It could be writing an algorithm, it could be explaining the code, it could be whatever that is available now. I am not even catching up with what is available. So I think that's the way I see it, right? You should work with the AI rather than, thinking that AI will replace you altogether, right? I think we haven't reached that stage yet.
Sure. Okay. All right. I think I have learned a lot from the conversation with you, and also a bit like I need to like analyze, digest what you say, and convert into a writing form. So now I have some time off, so in between work, right? So I will follow your footprint. You really my inspiration Like I follow you for some time with the technical journal. Yeah, I learned a lot from this conversation. Yeah, let's keep in touch, and please share me those link that you mentioned about the top 3 podcasts, and so the author with the book about how to make decision. Yeah, and anything you think like beneficial to the Vietnamese engineers that following my Vietnamese engineer stories. Yeah, please share, and then I will put into the footnote.
Sure, I will send it over to you after this chat.
Yeah, thank you so much, Henry. I wish you have like peaceful weekend with family. Yeah. See you again
Thank
soon.
you. Yeah,
Thank you, Henry.
same to you.
Yeah,
Bye.
bye.